going to name names. Big companies. Places that you go, probably, all did the same thing. Grabbed that Eric Meyer's CSS reset, threw it onto the site, and went merrily on their way. Now, nobody did this on purpose, right? Well, I hope nobody did it on purpose. And I actually went and viewed the source of these sites and was able to find the reset in it. So I'm pretty sure that they didn't just go in and remove outlines on purpose. But removing it accidentally has the same effect. Right? And so the good news is that even Eric Meyer realized that was a mistake and created a new version of CSS Reset that doesn't have that in anymore. So if you're using version 1.0, please, 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 please upgrade. Your users will thank you, and I will be one of your users. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's focusable on a web page. So by default, you basically have links and all kinds of form controls, iframes. The body element actually is the first thing that gets focus on the page before you start going through links. Iframes, objects, those can all get focus. And then there's a bunch of stuff that cannot get focus, like spans, divs, p. Basically everything else cannot receive focus. And that asterisk is by default, can't receive focus. So what are some things you can do to work with focus? Because focus is so important to experience. Well, if you get an element, you can actually just set focus directly to it in JavaScript. You just say .focus, and you set focus to it. Very easy. And that's actually a very important technique for building accessible websites, is understanding where focus should go to help me and other users continue using the keyboard to navigate around. You can also retrieve the currently focused element by using document.activeElement. That gives you whatever element currently has focus. And so in this case, that would be equal to the button that I just set focus to. Right? Very easy, a few lines of code. Now, you can make things focusable by adding a tab index property attribute. Tab index 0 inserts that element into the normal tab order. So you can tab to it just like a link or a button or anything else. And you can also set focus to it, whereas before you couldn't. So spans, you can call focus on it initially, but it won't actually set focus unless you set a tab index on it. Now, if you set tab index to -1, it's not in the normal tab order, but you can actually still set focus to it using JavaScript. So this is one of those tricks where if you need to set focus to something, but you don't want people to be able to tab back to it. And there are a couple reasons why you might want that we'll talk about in a bit. So a little advice about focus. Don't hide the focus rectangle, please. Unless you're using a custom focus style. It's completely OK to create something better than what the browser does by default. Right? Nobody wants to stop you from doing that. But just removing the focus rectangle altogether makes me cry. And it's really not a pretty sight. Use links to navigate to URLs. So don't try to make spans and stuff do that. And use buttons for in-page actions and form submissions. Speaking of links and buttons, I would like to do that. That's the only way that I can interact with the page is through links and buttons. I navigate between them, and I press enter. And that's how I interact with the page. And so some characteristics of links and buttons to keep in mind. One is that they can receive focus by default. You don't have to do anything special. They can just get focus. Second is that they show their focus visually. Like I just showed you with the focus outline. You can actually tell when it has focus. By default, you don't have to do anything special. It's part of the normal tab order. Just, again, by default, I can tab to it without you doing anything. And the on-click event handler is called when enter is pressed when I have focus on one of these, right? So links and buttons are actually very accessible. And this is something that I think people miss a lot in the conversation about accessibility, is that the web is accessible. It was built to be accessible. We make it not accessible by making poor decisions about how we implement things. And so when you understand that, you understand all you need to do is get out of the way of what the web is trying to do, and your site is accessible. Now, some ways to kind of mess things up is to do stuff like this. Right? Creating a span and putting an on-click event handler on it. Not focusable, doesn't have visual focus, doesn't have tab order, and it won't fire on-click when you press enter. Right? Even though somebody with the mouse can go over and click on it, and you can even change the style when somebody hovers over it. If I can't get focus, then I can't use it. So that is not a button. So okay, what if I add a tab index attribute to it? Well, now it's focusable, and it can have visual focus, and it can be part of the tab order. It still cannot fire an on-click when you press enter. Still not a button. And some people will go, well, if you add like the ARIA role in there, so ARIA is accessible rich internet applications. It's additional roles that you can add onto HTML that tell assistive technology more information about the elements that are underneath. So in this case, I said role equals button. Now, if you're using a screen reader, it'll actually tell you this thing is a button instead of it being a span. If you're not using a screen reader, it does nothing. It's exactly the same as not having that at all. It still doesn't press enter for on-click. Now, I want to show you an example. I'm going to try to show you an example, see if we can figure out this web browser thing. Right, Gmail. I'm praying there's nothing embarrassing in the list there. What is, with, yeah, illegal touching, that's a good one. That was, yeah, Nicole had a dream about me. Maybe we should get on with this here. So this is the menu in Gmail that tells you about the keyboard shortcuts. And I'll talk a little bit more about these keyboard shortcuts later, but not all of the keyboard shortcuts are enabled by default in Gmail. Okay? And you can see there's that disable link up there. Now, I've enabled all of the keyboard shortcuts myself, obviously, because I want to use them. But let's just say, for fun, that said enable instead of disable. And I came in here for the first time as a keyboard-only user, and I wanted to turn it on. And I pressed enter, and nothing happened. And so I pressed enter again because I thought maybe I didn't actually press enter. And it did nothing. And I kept hitting enter, and still nothing was happening. Well, what's going on there? So yeah, there's a span doing exactly what I said was not a button. Right? So we have role equals link, which is another ARIA thing that says, hey, screen readers and assistive technology, treat this thing as a link. I'll say, OK. And I'm going to add a tab index. Tab index is 1. So I can actually tab to it, which is awesome. But then I can't use it because it's not a link and it's not a button. It's just a span, which clearly has an on-click on it because I actually can go and click on it and it'll work. But I can't tab to it and press enter, which basically means, all right, so that was fun-ish. So now I want to talk to you about this thing called spatial navigation. How many people have heard of spatial navigation? Yeah. Excellent. How many people heard about it from me? All right, that's what I thought. John, you're good. All right, so spatial navigation, Victor, yeah? Okay. Spatial navigation is this really cool thing. Where do we have it? So Opera created it, and you can actually also do it in Chrome using this extension called Crossfire, which I do have installed. And spatial navigation is this interesting idea of you may actually want to navigate links and buttons by the way they appear on the screen rather than the way that they appear in the source. Because if you remember earlier, I told you as I was tabbing through, I was actually tabbing through in the order in which those links and buttons were in the source, right? Which, when you're looking at the screen, doesn't always make sense. Because things aren't arranged in the source the way that they're arranged in the screen. And yeah, sometimes I end up pressing tab 100 times just to get to the one link that I want. And what spatial navigation does is it tries to figure out, based on the layout of the page, what would be the next link or button in each direction, right? And so if I go back, we'll close that for now. And we'll go back to my blog. And I'm actually just going to reload so I get the normal focus rectangles back. So now I can use Shift and the various arrows to move around. And so like before, I was going all the way across the top just to get to the first article. But what if I just want to go right down? Because that's where I wanted to go. Right? So I just did Shift down. And I can just go along like that. And maybe I want to go to the right. And sometimes it has a little trouble figuring out what's the next link to the right. And so if you think about this, what's the next link from the right of here? You and I might go, oh, it's like all the way over there, right? But actually, if you think about what's the next link coming across in columns, what would be the next link to the right? It would be one of those up there. So it's a little bit weird, but if I hit, let me go back. Yeah, okay, so I can end up all over the place, is basically the lesson there. But the cool thing is that in ending up all over the place, I can more quickly go in the direction that I want and just be able to move around without worrying too much about tab order. But you still can't do this with spans. Right? It still has to be links. And this actually, I think I was actually complaining on Twitter one day. I was like, oh, navigating the web with keyboard sucks so bad. I hate using tabs. And a guy tweeted at me, he's like, haven't you heard of spatial navigation? And I said, what the hell is that? And I went and looked it up. And like, dude, you are my lifesaver. Because I use this every day on every single web page that I'm on. And it's a really cool feature that I'm hoping will make it into more browsers. I know that like Firefox actually implemented it, but it's not part of the regular release for some reason. So hopefully we can get them to do that because it's really cool.